Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video I'm going to be restoring this antique table that I found on the side of the road. Someone was throwing it away and I thought it was too beautiful to leave on the side of the road and let it be thrown out. So I'm going to try to fix this up and I'll show you guys how to go about doing this. It's in really rough shape, so I'm going to have to take apart a lot of the pieces and glue it back together and then reassemble all of it. So starting out, I noticed two of the legs are completely loose, almost falling off, so I'm going to take those completely off of the table. I'll clean up the joints and then be able to clamp and glue those back onto the post. The post itself is actually really wobbly too, so I'm going to take that apart and reinforce it up towards the tabletop and make sure that's sturdy as well. This joint, I can tell, has already been repaired several times. There's a lot of excess glue inside the hole and all over the joint, so I need to shave that off and I'll drill out the hole, make sure that the dowel can fit back in. Then I'll re-glue it and clamp it and it should hold really well. Now to reinforce these legs, I'm going to be putting in a few screws along the bottom and then one in the middle of each of these legs. And the bottom is really where most of the stress is. When you put pressure on the table, it's trying to pry the bottom of that leg out away from the post. So I'm going to put in those screws just as the second reinforcement. Now the base is all put back together, I need to start on the tabletop. And to do this, I'm going to take the wings off of either side of the table and sand those and finish those down individually, then put them back together. Now this tabletop is in really rough shape. There's quite a few splits and cracks in the top, but I think it's still salvageable. I'm going to put some glue in between these cracks, clamp it down and see how much I can repair that way. Everything else I'll be able to fill with some homemade wood putty that I'll show you guys how to make. As that glue is drying, I'm going to come over here, clean off the table stand, and I'm actually going to be painting this. I won't be sanding it down and finishing it. I noticed that the center post is a different type of wood as the legs, so it might look odd if I sanded it all down and restain. So I'm going to paint the bottom and get that all ready for the tabletop as that's drying. Alright, so now I'm going to show you guys how to make that wood putty I was talking about. You take some regular wood glue and whatever sanding dust from the wood that you're trying to repair, you mix that together and it'll make a really thick paste, and you just push that into whatever crack or dent or chip that you're trying to repair on the wood, and it'll match pretty closely to the wood that you're trying to repair because the sawdust came from that wood to begin with. So I'm going to fill all the cracks and any dents, chips from the wood, and I'll come back and sand that down once it dries a little bit. Here you can see one of the largest cracks that's on the tabletop, and the wood putty has filled that in really well, and once you stain and add the finish, it'll be hardly noticeable at all. Now in one of the leaves there's a huge gouge in the wood, so I'm going to use the same method of making that wood putty, put some wood glue down on that crack, and then fill it in with sawdust and just try to mix it together as best as I can. Once that dries down a little bit, you can easily sand it off and it'll leave a nice smooth finish with that crack filled right in. Now with any table that has wings on it, you really want to make sure you sand down the joint in between the wing and the table on both sides, because when you add the wood finish on top or even paint, it's easy to overload that gap in there and will cause the wing to get stuck and not be able to open or close. And in some cases I've seen where the thin flap of wood that goes on top of the table to line up with the tabletop, that will actually break off and cause a lot of damage to your tabletop. So I'm going to sand that down, make sure that's nice and clean. Now it's time to start staining the wood, and then I will add the finish on top of that once it's dry. This wood is turning out beautifully. I think this is some of the most beautiful wood that I've been able to work with. I really love this tabletop with the dark stain on it. It's soaking in that stain really nicely. So I'm going to take a clear coat of polyacrylic. It's a water-based finish. I add a nice thick coat of that on top of the wood and then let that dry. And I'll need to bring that back, sand it down lightly to make sure there are no bubbles in the finish and smooth that out. And I'll apply one more coat on top of that. Now I'm getting ready to assemble the table, and I'm going to reuse all the old hardware that was originally on the table, and these hinges are really rusted, so I'm going to actually sand those down, try to just make them look a little bit better, but then I also need to oil the hinges and get them moving freely so it doesn't add any unnecessary stress on the wings when you try to open and close them. Now with this hinge, both of the screws are stripped out, they're not holding, so I'm actually going to fill up the holes with wood glue and then put quite a few wood splinters into the hole to fill it up. And then when I put in the screw, it will actually give something for it to bite onto and hold onto the wood. Now you still don't want to put a ton of pressure on the screws when you're tightening it. Just put it snug, let it dry, and then you can come back and tighten it a little bit more later as the wood glue dries. But this will give it a lot more strength, and long term it will hold really well. Now, one thing I didn't mention is I didn't refinish the bottom of the tabletop, and that's purposeful. I didn't want to cover up some of the branding marks from the maker, as well as a couple other stickers of places that this has been sold at. Has a lot of character and shows its age, so I wanted to keep that intact underneath the table. Now this table's almost finished, but if you guys have not yet subscribed, before I get to finishing this video, hit that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner. Help me out, let me know you guys like these videos, and I'll keep producing more of them. Now the final step before this is finished, I'm going to take 600 grit sandpaper, which is really fine sandpaper, and I'm going to lightly buff over top of this wood, and this will just take down any high spots on the finish and smooth out any bumps that are still on that finish. Now I'll take a rag after that and buff out any marks or scuffs from the sandpaper, and this will really just add the shine back into that finished coat and clean it up. Alright guys, thanks for sticking in all the way to the end of the video, seeing the finished product. I'm super happy with this. It turned out beautifully. I love working on antiques, and antique wood just has so much character. It does take a ton of work and a lot of patience to repair antiques, but it's definitely rewarding, and I love the finished product of these pieces. Alright guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Also hit that bell icon if you want YouTube to let you know when I upload a new video. And hit that like button if you want to let me know you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next one.